Hi guys, this is going to be a quick tutorial on how I block stuff out in CryEngine. So the first thing that I've done is I've created a paper plan of my level. So just to quickly go over how I've done this, I should just say this isn't necessarily the best way to do a paper plan. This is just how, what mine looks like. The whole point of a paper plan is to help you build your level, so whatever works for you is the best way to do it, really. So for me, my level is going to be, I'm going to start off here on a kind of beach, and these dark grey bits are kind of tall cliffs, the blue is some water, so you're going to kind of come up a ramp and then through a cave, maybe have some kind of little jumping puzzle or something to get across this kind of cavern bit, and then into another cave, then out onto a narrow ledge, and then this is my some buildings that you go into. So the kind of concept for this was maybe some sort of sci-fi lab type thing. So I've done a few things, like used some loops in this so that you this is a aerial walkway, so you go through this and then you kind of do a loop round and back over where you walked under. So if I was designing this for gameplay, then I could probably put some extra things in here, such as put in my enemy placement where I'm planning on having those. But for the moment we're just going to build this, so this is good enough. The first thing I'm going to do is save that out as a bitmap. So save that as a bitmap, 24 bit. In CryEngine, I'm just going to create a new level. I'm going to make my terrain 512 by 512, which just kind of matches up with this about right. So that's, if I divide that by 100, which is these grid spacings, if 1 meter in CryEngine is a unit and it's 512 by 512, then my map's going to be 500 by 500 meters. So I believe that means that each of these grid spacings will be 5 meters. So you can get a rough idea. That would make this main lobby area here about 5, 10, 20, about 25 meters across, which is about right for what I want. So this might take a bit of experimentation to get the map size right in comparison to your plan, but that should work for me. So I'll call this blockout. And once this starts, we don't really need to do that. So now that we're in CryEngine, we can start blocking out our level. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just bring you can either drop the water level down or just build the terrain up to be above the water. So I'll just flatten out the terrain. See what the water level is. So modify and set water level. So the water level is at 16. So let's just make this a height of 17, and then make a great big brush and just paint that in. So now our terrain is just above our water, like so. So the next thing I want to do is I want to paint my map. I want to paint the height map over the height map that I drew on here. So to do that, I'm going to import a texture onto the terrain. Now actually going back to this, I want to just size this down, so 1024 will be fine. And I'll save that again as the bitmap. 1024 is just enough resolution for us to draw, and we're only doing this to get a guide, so I need to change this tile resolution now to match the size of my bitmap to 1024. Then I can just import, where are we? So import my paper map, and when I close that it should appear. So now straight away we've in a sense we've already got a bit of a block out. I can drop into the game straight away and I can sort of get a sense of how big my beach is going to be. So it's going to be quite small. You know what it might be like to kind of walk up these ramps and through this cave. So this is going to be quite a narrow cave, and then jumping over these. So obviously this will need quite a bit of tweaking, you know, to get the fine detail right. Again, dropping in here and sort of get a sense of the size of the doorway, which is just these red lines that I've painted, and how big this lobby area is going to be. So this little box in the corner is going to be a lift. So that might be could possibly be a bit smaller. But generally the scale of it's kind of looking okay. So if the scale seems completely off, then you might want to resize your map, or you might want to just do something like, for example, save that as your bitmap. So this could maybe be on a 1024 map now, and this is just going to be the middle bit of it. If it was, you know, if it was kind of to get the scale just about right. But anyway, my scale's about right, so I can start blocking this in. So what I'm going to do is go to the terrain panel and modify, flatten, and then pick a height, and then set my brush radiuses up to be about right. So this is going to be a kind of a sort of canyony desert terrain type feel, a little bit like the original Half-Life, if people remember that. So I can just start painting in my height map now. Make that a bit bigger. Like so. And again, I can drop into the game at any point and get an idea of the scale of this. So whether those cliffs are enormous or about right, I'd actually say that's about the right height. So I want them to be pretty big. So I can just continue blocking this in. At any point, if I hold down Control, I'll get a dropper to pick a height off the map. So here, where I've kind of painted in where I didn't want to, I can just pick that height in and then paint that back down. And obviously this really doesn't need to be exact at all, because this paper plan was only a very quick sketch. And then what I also want to do to make this terrain kind of look a bit more like realistic terrain is maybe pick a height kind of halfway up and just start to kind of modify this a little bit. So you can play with these tools. It might be a good idea as well just to change my time of day to be something where I can kind of see the terrain and what I'm doing a bit better. And then if you hold down Shift as well, you can smooth things out. So also come in and smooth these out. So obviously this is going to be a fairly time consuming task to go through and kind of paint this terrain or modify this height map to be just the way that I want it and to kind of look like realistic terrain. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll start it again once I've done that. Okay, so I've gone through and sort of painted my the height map on my terrain. It's definitely not perfect. I could spend a lot more time on this, but it's kind of the thing that's important for me at the moment with blocking this out is that I'm getting a good sense of scale. So I'm dropping into the game quite often to see and to check that things look about the right height and the right distance away and all that kind of stuff. And it's also, I need to make sure that I've got this area pretty much down how I want it, where I'm going to start putting these buildings. So now that I've done that, I can start blocking in the buildings. So the way that I do this is that I'm going to block them in really fast with solids, and then I'm going to block them in a bit more detail in 3ds Max. So the solid tool is kind of awkward to work with in CryEngine, but the thing that's nice about blocking out with solids is that I can start to walk through some of the corridors and get a really fast idea of how my level is going to play out and how it's going to flow. So I want to make sure, well, first of all I want to go to Objects, so the Objects Roll-Up tab, and Solid, and I want to make sure that Follow Terrain, one of these two is ticked, and that just means that when I start drawing my solid, it'll draw it on top of the terrain. So let's just drag one in, and there we go. That's probably a little bit taller than I wanted. Obviously, you know, on your paper plan you might want to map out how many stories these buildings have and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to make this kind of two levels tall, so they're going to be quite tall levels as well. If I come out of the solid tool and I go into, so I select solid and then go to editing mode, I can select a face on it in the selection type, and then I can just use my movement gizmo to move that down a bit. One of the nice things about doing this in CryEngine is if you have your helpers on, which is shift space to turn those on and off, then you get just a little bit of text telling you how big all of this stuff is. So 10 meters may be about right. Yeah, that looks about right. So now I can just start copying this and building my other walls. I'll take that one. So at the moment I don't really care about things like this where these walls are, that one's sticking out a bit and overlapping, because I am only really doing this to get some kind of sense of scale. But I do want to put this corridor in, so I go into editing mode in that. And then come out of that, select this one, oops, back into edit mode, select that face, draw this out, and I can just continue to block in some of this level. So yeah, I'll pause this again and come back when I've blocked that in. So just quickly, as I've been putting this together, I thought I'd just quickly go over how to do kind of more complex shapes with solids. So there might actually be a better way of doing this that I don't know about. I'm not an expert in CryEngine solids, but let's say I want to build this as a cylindrical room. I can select, I've just made a cylinder, so you just go to solid and change the shape to cylinder. And then if I go into edit mode, I can select a face, so this face, and I can delete that top face. Should be able to. Oh, sorry. Under face, hit delete. Now if I come out of this, I can copy that. I can scale it down a bit. And if I go back into edit mode, I can select all of these faces. And I can flip them, and that should, and I also want to flip this bottom face as well. Select that one and flip it that bit as well. And now I've got the shape that I wanted. So using these tools, if you're used to using things like 3ds Max, it takes ages to do anything that would take, you know, a couple of clicks in Max. But but it is useful that I can block this out, and it's, you know, I can just get a sense of the scale straight away, and there's also collision and all that kind of stuff on it, so I can walk inside it. I can build platforms and walkways and all that kind of stuff. Right, so I've boxed this out very, very quickly. I would definitely recommend spending a bit more time than I have. This will probably take me 10 minutes or so. But like I said, the main thing is that I want to get an idea of just of the scale of everything. So I just want to be able to move around in it and check that everything feels about the right size. So walking in through the main door, I've just put simple ramps in instead of stairs. And then here I've left that side open because I'm going to have, this is going to be all kind of glass down this side of this kind of balcony bit. So then I can get some idea of the view that I'll get out of that. So I can see kind of round and where I'm going to go kind of along this walkway here. And then into a big sort of round, I don't know, this could be like a silo or something. Maybe have some walkways and some ladders going around here. I didn't block those in, but I probably should have done. But if we imagine that I came up there. So I mean, obviously when you're blocking out, you should probably have a bit more of a concept in mind than I've had when I've put this together, because I just wanted this to kind of demonstrate the technique. And to be honest, I haven't really put much thought into it. So I'm not quite sure what would happen here. You'll be up there, and there'll be some way down into this large room. So I was thinking this could be sort of an office type room, maybe with lots of little segmented office areas, and then up another staircase, and across this walkway. So again, this will probably be glass on either side so that you can see out of that and see again around to where you've been. And then it was going to go into a kind of a cave into this big rock here, which is where, I don't know, there's going to be like a secret base was built in there or something. So one thing again that I can see is straight away that this terrain needs lifting up a little bit, so I can do that. This would potentially be a good time as well to start building some of the holes in the terrain to make these caves using the voxel objects, but I'll probably do another tutorial at some point on how to use those. It's kind of quite a big different topic, but for the moment this is my boxed out level, and I'm pretty happy with the size and the scale of it. So what I want to do now is to start refining this a lot. Obviously these solid tools are kind of awful to use, and CryEngine's definitely not designed to be used very much with these. So if you use something like the BSP in UDK, you know, back in the day, BSP used to be used to build levels where you can almost exclusively build levels out of BSP. So I think their tools are a bit more, they're a bit more in depth than the solids tool in CryEngine, where in CryEngine they're expecting you to build everything as models and export it in. So what we could do, if we're going to refine this now and start to work on it more in 3ds Max, we could do with putting all of this into Max. So we can do that by just start Max up. If we go to this little button here, select terrain area, then we can select add terrain. So we want the whole thing, and once you've selected the terrain, so just drag a box around it. If you go to File and Export Terrain Area with Objects, and let's save this as an OBJ. In fact, you can save it as an FBX as well, but an OBJ will be fine. I'll call it blockout. Save that. And then if we go across to Max, so in Max, just start a new, make a new scene, and let's import. So file, import, and I think that's the wrong one. Put it into there. So there's my blockout OBJ, and you'll see it's got the terrain and all of these solids that we made as well. So let's import this. It's just saying that it's missing it can't find the materials that are on there, but we don't care about that anyway, so let's just skip all of those. And what you'll need to do once it's in is, you see if I deselect it, it goes invisible, and that's because it hasn't got any material on it at all. So just open your material editor, M, and just drag a normal material onto there, onto everything. And there we are. So now we have our blockout in 3ds Max. So you can see our beach area that we made. We can also see that our terrain definitely needs quite a bit of work and smoothing. I mean, I would probably fix the terrain in another program, to be honest. So I might take the terrain into something like Mudbox and sculpt it out better in that, and then import it back into CryEngine, simply because those tools are much better than the terrain sculpting tools in CryEngine. So the next thing that might be useful to do is just, if we select the terrain and if we put it onto its own new layer, so we'll just call that terrain. If you are making particularly large terrains, like 4000 by 4000 terrains, importing the entire terrain into 3ds Max is going to absolutely kill Max. So what I suggest you do is, if you have very large terrains, you can just select the area that you want. So you could just select this area here, and it will import it in at world 0. So world 0 in CryEngine should be this corner here. So if I just drop some kind of object in, just drop in this tree. It's a big tree. So if I move that to 0, 0, 0, you can see that it's this corner is at 0, which is the same in 3ds Max. So you can see that the terrain, the pivot point of the terrain is there, and it's at 0, 0, 0. If I select any of these solids, they also have the pivot at 0, 0, 0. So everything has its pivot point set to 0, which is a really useful thing, because one thing we can do is we can modify this solid. So if I just get rid of the terrain, if we were to modify this solid and then export it back out at 0, 0, 0, then it'll pop back in to CryEngine in the exact place that we want it. Delete that. So now that I've kind of got this set up in 3ds Max, I can start blocking things out properly. So build a cube, just get shaded mode. So these solids are going to give me an idea of where, roughly the size of things and where I should place them, but I'm not going to pay too much attention to these anymore. So, I mean, one thing is, I don't know if these walls are incredibly thick. Look. No, they're probably about right actually, so I can kind of copy that. It would actually be a good idea to be doing some of this with my snaps turned on and making sure that I'm using consistent sizes for everything. But for the moment, let's just do this quite quickly. I can fix that stuff later. So extrude that. So I'm not going to go through modelling this, but at this point I would probably start kind of thinking about where to place things. So as well as having this room, let's just put a plane down on there, another box for the floor as well. So I would definitely recommend doing this a lot more methodically than I am, and start measuring these things out in exact amounts. It'll make life easier if this room is exactly 25 meters by 25 meters. So yeah, I would probably start doing things at this point, like putting in some pillars to the room, if I want pillars in the room. And actually kind of starting to plan out my geometry a lot better. So maybe there's a table over here as well. Some kind kind of big reception desk or something that's out front here. So it's always useful as well when you're building in Max to just make a box that's about 1.8 meters high by about, I don't know, 0.5 by 0.5. And move that into position. So this is about the size of a person in CryEngine, so you get some idea of the scale. Just make sure as well that in customize unit setup you're set to meters, and if you click on system unit setup, 1 unit equals 1 centimetre. Okay, so the last thing that we want to do is, now that we're in a situation where we can start blocking out our geometry kind of properly in 3ds Max and we've got a lot more control, we want to kind of sync this with how, we want to sync a way of working with this to put this back into CryEngine quickly and have it in the correct place. So what I've done here is I've just made another layer and put the solids onto that layer, so I can hide my terrain and I can hide out the solids as well and just be left with the stuff that I'm doing in Max. So what I want is these can all stay separate objects, but what I want to do is I want these to have a pivot set at 0, 0, 0, so that in CryEngine I can move them to 0, 0, 0 and they'll just pop into the correct place. So to do that, if I just select all of them and go to the hierarchy panel and go to Effect Pivot Only and move the pivot to 0, 0, 0, and then you can see all of their pivots have moved to that 0 point in Max. So now if I select all of them, and the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this is saved into the correct folder. So I've put it into my CryEngine folder, Game SDK Objects. I've made a new folder called Blockout, and I've just saved this as Blockout1. So that's saving the Max file. Then if we go to our CryEngine exporter, select everything that you want to export and just click Add Selected. You want to make sure that Export File Per Node is unchecked, so that this all exports as just one piece of, as one object altogether. You could leave Export File Per Node switched on, so tick it, but then you'd have to drag them all in separately and move them to the right place. So if I select all of them and give it a custom file name, so click Custom File Name, I'll call it Blockout Buildings, and Export Nodes. So then come back into CryEngine and we should be able to bring this in now. So you might have to so go to this section, the roll-up bar, the Objects section, go to Brush, and you might have to click Reload to be able to see it. Go to Blockout Buildings and drag them in, and you probably won't see anything because where our cursor is the pivot point, so the geometry is actually miles off from the pivot. But if you just drag it in and change the location to 0, 0, 0, you should see it snaps perfectly into place. And finally, what we can do is if we go to this tab, not that tab, this tab, which is, I don't know what that tab's called, but it's that one there. You can hide by category, so you can hide your solids. And now we've just got our blockout in there. And finally, what we might want to do just to make this look a bit nicer is if we open our material editor, so just click M on the keyboard to do that, and type in white to the search box, and you should find I think this white matte material will do, and there you go, just apply that, and that'll give you some kind of material on there. So now you can block out your entire level very quickly in Max, and if you select everything and set their pivot point to 0, you can very quickly bring it into CryEngine, test it out, and start to iterate like that. So that's it. Obviously we could add collision and so on to this. There's loads of tutorials out there for how to do that. I've probably put something up. In fact, I think I might already have something up showing you how to add collision. And yeah, so we can start blocking out all of our little details like tables. Obviously this table is unbelievably high, so we should be able to see if I turn on my solids again. You can see that this is about the size of a person, so 1.8 meters high. So that gives me a good idea in Max of the scale of things that I should be going for. But obviously if you move quickly from 3ds Max into CryEngine, and you do that, you constantly kind of test as you go along, then you won't spend hours boxing out a load of tables and cupboards and what have you, debris, and find that it's all 10 times larger than it should be. So that is blocking out in CryEngine and Max.